Divine peace and blessings. Today I want to talk about self-identity and the process of self-identity. Now, just in talking about identity in general, we can look at nationality, ethnicity, race, religion, culture, literally where you're from, what neighborhood you grew up in, what part of the world you formulated your experience in. So I think one of the very basic tenets of the journey of self-identity is experience. So I think it is natural, it is somehow human to the process that as we utilize our five senses, let's make it as simple as possible. As we learn, we're utilizing our five senses. It's what we hear, it's what we see, it's what we smell, it's what we feel, it's what we touch. We internalize what we smell, we internalize those experiences, and we somehow, through human nature, self-apply that experience. We internalize that experience. Now, individually, we respond to that differently. Uh, that moves some people to activity, that moves others to inactivity, that moves many to a sense of self-denial, if you will, as we experience through the five senses, we find a way to separate that experience from ourselves. And indeed, the only place to begin in self-experience and self-realization is within. And so I'm on that journey now, and I've always been on that journey. It is a lifelong journey. It is not something that you get on at one exit and you sort of get off at another exit. Um, we continue to evolve, much like the spirit evolves, much like God evolves, much like the universe evolves. So there is no beginning or ending per se. But in this stage of my journey, of course, I'm looking at DNA, I'm looking at genealogy, I'm looking at history, and I'm learning through sharing of my experience that this causes others who perceive this experience with their five senses to then feel some kind of way about it. And for many, it's positive. It's self-assuring for them that maybe there is something else that I can do to increase my self-awareness, to bring greater understanding to who I am, where I come from, um, what my roots are, um, from a more individual perspective. We tend to live in a very politically charged, nationalistic, very generalized experience. So we want to be a part of something, but we tend to look outside ourselves for that something. And then we apply a whole set of beliefs and principles and whatnot to that to sort of make that make sense. And in fact, that is the opposite of the journey of self-awareness. You got to start with who you are, where you came from. We have great leaders, great elders who have left legacy, who have left story. We share unified energy when we talk about slavery, when we talk about civil rights, when we talk about many of the battles that we share commonly uh, as a people here on the planet. But at some point, we have to get out of the self-denial. Well, I don't want to know all of my story, or I only want to know parts of my story, or I only want to know the royal parts of my story, or I only want to know the people who were kings and queens and who wore gold. You cut out how you got from point A to point B to point C to point D. You cut out the color of the portrait, you cut out the details of the portrait, you cut out the story. And indeed, it is the story individually that collectively makes us a strong people, a unified people, a colorful people, a powerful people. But we live in a day and time where the individual, I believe, gets lost in the perpetuation of a group mindset. We see that in religion, we see that in the so-called conscious community, we see that among the movers and shakers, we see that among the people who hold positions of power, we see that at grassroots level, we see that in the hood, we see that in community organizations where there is a perception of who should be in control. And a part of that collective perception is to deny individual events, individual facts, individual evidence, individual characteristics, individual information that helps to form a much more complete, a much more whole sense of what we're looking at, what we're talking about. And right now we're talking about self-identity. So many of you are not only in denial about slavery. Now, understand what I'm saying. You know, the lynching post still gets high likes and favorable, responses for the most part. It's a popular, emotional, sensitive, it falls in line with the rhythm of today, the sensationalism of media. Very few of those posts go into any amount of detail. My beloved queen, Tony Martinez, goes into a great amount of detail. But we pay very close attention to who even bothers to acknowledge the detail. Many of us are very emotionally ego responsive. And that becomes a problem when we start talking about knowledge, information, consciousness, spirituality, power, truly being in a place of understanding about where you are within all of this. Otherwise, you continue to feed victimization, you continue to feed isolation, you continue to feed all the illusions and delusions that keep us separate and from actively doing anything, even the most basic things. So in your journey of self-awareness, finding out who you are, it's more than parenting. It's more than who your mother and father is. That's a part of the journey. And we can't ignore the father we don't know. We can't ignore the mother that we may not have a healthy relationship. We can't ignore the branches of our family that were never talked about for variety and diversity of reasons. And many of those things begin to surface when you have facts. And one of those facts being DNA. Many of the secrets of who we are, who our family is, what that journey has been, are hidden there. Granted, it's a new science, it's a new tool to that journey. It's something we did not have in the past. So these stories, the legends, the telling, the repeating was crucial in the past to communicating the information. But we now have something else extra to work with. So let's not now put up a new wall, a new conspiracy, a new reason to prevent ourselves from utilizing the fullness of what's available to us in terms of self-awareness, self-identity. It is only with that information can we bring anything whole to the table. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Ashe.